Okay, and this is just a little disclaimer that I follow the APA manual as closely as I can, do my best to interpret it, but occasionally I find out that I've been interpreting things wrong and have to change my way of thinking. And if you think that that is the case, feel free to let me know, because I'm always learning too. Okay, so just really to start at the root of this, what is APA style? Well, it's one of many editorial styles. There's Modern Language Association editorial style that English departments tend to use. There's American Medical Association style, which the unique thing about American Medical Association style is that they use superscript numbers for their citations, and then the numbers that in the citations correspond to a numbered reference list. And the entries in the reference list are organized in order of mention in the manuscript, not alphabetical order by first author name, which is something unique about APA style. The APA manual is intended for use by authors who are writing manuscripts for publication in journals that require authors to use APA style. So that's why a lot of times as a student, when you're looking in the manual, it seems like much of the information is not really relevant to you, and that's because there are many things in there that we choose not to make exceptions to and have you just follow the APA manual as it's written. And then so in other words, there's several style requirements that just aren't truly relevant to student papers. And then there are a few exceptions that Allen College makes just to make your papers easier to categorize, I guess. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is just structural elements. Okay, so I'm sure you all written a paper before, or you've had to write in APA style. And there's the dreaded running head that you're going to position in the document header. And basically the running head is a shortened version of the paper title. Some people call it an abbreviated version, but I hesitate to use the word abbreviated because that implies that you can put abbreviations in it, which you cannot do. You're supposed to use exact words from the full paper title. You just use a few, say, key words from the title. Usually it's 2 to 3 keywords. It has to be a maximum, or it can't be more than 50 characters, including spaces. It's positioned flush left and typed in uppercase letters. One of the most common errors I see in the running head is that students will type that shortened title in sentence or in title case. So not everything is capitalized like it should be. And then on the title page, the words running head and a colon precede the actual shortened paper title. Okay, then there, of course, are your page numbers. And they're going to be inserted in the document header. And I emphasize inserted because the idea is that you not type actual numbers, that you use a tool in your word processor to insert sort of page number formatting, and then the word processor knows to number your pages consecutively from page 1 to the last page of the paper. So you don't want to type actual numbers. You need to, some things I'll point out about the running head that are also common errors is that the running head elements need to be typed in the same font as the rest of the paper. So a lot of times I'll see that students will type the running head and they won't change the font because the paper default is set like in a serif, or excuse me, a sans serif font like Calibri, and they forget to change that. And then they go on and they type the rest of the paper and type it in a serif font, which you're supposed to do, but then the running head is sort of out of compliance. So for an APA formatted paper, the title page is always page 1, and that page number always does actually appear on the title page in the upper right-hand corner. This is just a screenshot of a basic title page, and you can see that full title of the paper is sort of ghosted out here because I've got the document header active, and then you can see the header formatting toolbar up here. The full title of the paper is Writing Academic Papers Using American Psychological Association Editorial Style, and I created a shortened title with the first 3 words of that. And you can see that I used a tab to separate the page number from the the actual running head. And I wasn't planning on actually demonstrating the setup of this today because I could actually spend a whole hour just talking about setting up an academic paper and formatting a reference list, but that's not what our objective is today. So anyway, that's kind of what your running head will look like on your first page. Another element of the paper that's a structural element is the page margins. Your page margins need to be at least 1 inch on all sides of the paper. That means top, bottom, left, and right. They can be greater than 1 inch. You can actually have margins set at 1.25 inches or greater than that, which is a trick maybe students used to use years ago when they were typing papers on a typewriter. If they were required to have a certain number of pages and they didn't think they had enough material to have that many pages, they might make the margins wider so that they have less type space area, and that way they could achieve the number of pages more easily. But I would recommend that you just use 1 inch margins. It's easiest to remember that. And the reason I mention 1.25 is because a lot of times your word processing software will be set with 1.25 margin on the left and right as a default, and so you probably have to change that default in order to have your 1 inch margins all around.
Lisa?
Yes?
I have a question here regarding binding. So when our document is done and we go to bind, there's usually 1.5 inches that you have to allow for binding. So do you just then make it 1.5 inches? Because that would bring it really in on the other side too. You know?
I think your graduate programs, or your dissertation or thesis manual would probably specify different margins, but
for my graduate students right now, we had to move everything over. So
now, did our external audience hear her question?
Nobody has said otherwise.
Okay. Okay. I know when I did had my dissertation bound, I didn't have to change anything about the margins. They were just 1 inch margins all around. I think I could look back and see, but yeah, that should be specified, I would think, in your project manual, though, or your dissertation manual.
And Lisa, if you just want to reiterate that there is a dissertation template that has been sent out. That is sent out.
Okay.
We're ready to do the dissertation.
Okay. Brenda says that you received your dissertation template. If you're ready to do your dissertation, you should have received that by email as an attachment. Okay. All right, line spacing. You're going to use double spacing uniformly throughout the entire document. And you want to make sure that you make that the space before and space after settings are set at 0 point, because Microsoft Word used to, I don't know if it still does, but it used to default to 10 points of space after, so that every time you hit a paragraph return, in addition to a double space, you'd get an extra 10 points of space. So you'd have a little bit wider than double spacing, which is a violation of APA guidelines. Okay, typeface. You need to use a serif font, and by serif I'm referring to these little marks on the ends of lines in the letters. Okay, these are serifs that I'm pointing to right now. Okay, and the usual serif font, or the most common one that's used in APA style papers, is Times New Roman. Courier is another serif font, but I'll tell you that Courier takes up more room because it's more widely spaced. So if you have a minimum, or if you have a minimum page or a maximum page specification for an assignment and you use Courier, you're going to use up more pages than you would if you used Times New Roman. So the opposite then of a serif font is a sans serif font. Sans meaning, I think that's Latin for without. So it means it doesn't have the serif. So you can kind of look at Calibri and Arial here, and they don't have serifs on them. And it looks like I included Century Gothic there, but I don't think that would be considered a sans serif font. Maybe it is, but it looks to me like it has little serifs on it. So disregard this one. I don't think that's truly a sans serif font. Now, an exception to using a sans serif font is that if you're creating a figure for inclusion in your paper, you may, a sans serif font may make the figure more readable. So you may be able to use that within the figure. I think the caption still has to be in a serif font. And 12 point is the typical size for fonts that you should use. So, and a lot of times Microsoft Word, I think, defaults to Calibri 11 point or 10 point, one of those, so you'll have to change that. Paragraphs. Paragraphs are always, this probably isn't a change from anything you're used to, but they're formatted flush left with a 1/2 inch first line indent. And you should use the tab tool or the first line indent tool to create the indent. And pretty soon a screenshot will come up here and I'll point out where you can find that to make it easier. I still have students who will use the space bar to create that first line indent. And I'll accept either a tab or an indent created with the first line indent tool, but I won't accept space bar tabbing. Okay, some rules of thumb then just about paragraphs in general is that it has to be at least 2 sentences to have a paragraph. A one sentence paragraph is not truly a paragraph, so you got to have at least 2 sentences to qualify as a paragraph. And generally, a paragraph length should not exceed 1 page. And I would say a rule of thumb, and I don't know where I read this or got it, is that a paragraph up of about 3/4 of a page is probably about as long as you would want. And I think that has to do with reader fatigue or something, reading through it. So less than a page, probably about 3/4 of a page is plenty for a length of a paragraph. Page order. As I mentioned before, title page is always page 1, and then your pages are numbered consecutively from page 1 forward. Now if you're doing a dissertation, there may be preliminary pages that are where you use lowercase Roman numerals to number them, and I'm not sure if that's the case with you guys or not, but it was with a dissertation that I did. We numbered preliminary pages like the signature pages and acknowledgments and things like that. I think were numbered with lowercase Roman numeral letters. Or I shouldn't say letters, just Roman case or lowercase Roman numerals. If an abstract were required in your paper, and they typically aren't at Allen College in academic papers, it would be on page 2 of the paper. Now I'm sure for a dissertation you're going to probably have an abstract, and so depending on what the guidelines are for the dissertation, it's probably going to be on page 2, maybe not depending on how that's set up or how the exceptions that Allen College makes to that, but generally it's going to be on page 2. And like I say, usually your instructors are not going to require an abstract, so you don't have to worry about that, but if they do, it's on page 2. Okay, headings. Headings are always tricky, and I'm not going to solve any heading problems you have right now. I recommend that you just refer.
There's a question from the audience. It says, I thought that you needed at least 3 sentences to make a paragraph. You need a topic, sentence, a body sentence, and an ending sentence.
Well, that's more particular than I am. The rule I go by is that it has to be at least 2 sentences. But I think probably most paragraphs are going to be at least 3 sentences. And I don't think it's going to be a problem for you at all if you follow your 3-rule paragraph rule. That should be fine. It's not wrong, but my 2-paragraph rule is not necessarily, it's not wrong either. Okay. All right, so back to headings. It's a good idea if you have a long paper, a relatively long paper, to use headings to organize it. If you have a multi-topic paper, it's a good idea to use headings. I'll just point out now, just because it's convenient to point it out, that you don't ever use introduction as a heading in an APA formatted paper unless, I suppose, your instructor made an exception to that rule. You wouldn't use introduction as a heading. And one of the things to remember about headings is that they follow the conventions of an outline. Okay, and so I provided a link here. I learned how to do outlining when I was in 3rd grade, I think, and it was sort of drilled into us outlining was, but I find that students nowadays don't necessarily understand the concepts of outlining. So I provide a link there to the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which is an excellent resource if you aren't already aware of it. It has way more information than just information about outlines, but it kind of goes through the conventions of outlining. Outlining doesn't necessarily mean you have to use Roman numerals, and that's not what I'm saying with headings. I'm not saying with when you do APA style headings that you're going to use Roman numerals as you would in an outline, but it's the hierarchical arrangement of the headings that I'm referring to. And this is sort of an outline here. It's not with Roman numerals, but it kind of gives you the a schematic for what your headings might be like in a paper. You've got a main topic, and then you might have a couple of subtopics. Now the thing to remember is that if you only have one subtopic within the main topic, then you don't qualify to use a subheading. Okay, so you'd have that level 1 heading, but if you're only going to have one subtopic, then you would leave out that second or that subtopic heading. So you got to have 2 subtopics in order to warrant using subheadings for them. So I'll back up a minute. So if you only have, say, 3 main topics in your paper and you don't have any subtopics within those main topics, then your paper would be organized with 3 level 1 headings. Okay? If you only had one main topic, then you wouldn't use any headings, because you have to use, in order to warrant the use of headings, you have to have at least 2 topics. Okay? You can't just use one. Okay, so let's say within one of those topics you did have 2 subtopics, and that's fine. If you have 2 subtopics, then it would make sense to organize them with 2 level 2 headings. And then within each of those subtopics, you might have subtopics. So then you would use level 3 headings to organize those subtopics. But you always have to have at least 2 subtopics in order to warrant the use of headings. Does that make sense?
Do you have to have 2 subtopics?
Yes.
As well.
You always have to have 2. If you're gonna, that's why I put in here. I mean, here I've got 3, but I couldn't just have just this one subtopic here. And like you might have a main topic section that doesn't have any subtopics in it. But if you didn't have at least 2, you wouldn't include headings. That doesn't mean you wouldn't address that subtopic in there, but you just wouldn't use a heading to do it.
And we had a comment from the virtual attendees that support that. If you're going to use a heading, there must be at least 2 headings at that level.
Yeah, okay. Very good. And I think the APA manual is pretty clear about explaining it, but there again, if it goes back to where you don't really understand the conventions of outlining, it's not going to make sense to you that if you have, one main topic, in order to use a heading for that main topic, you have to have at least another main topic. And within those main topics, to use the subheadings, you got to have at least 2 of that level. And I only went down to level 3 headings here, just within this one section, this one subtopic. But I think APA headings go all the way to level 5. So, and then it gets into whether or not you type them in italics and sentence case, and that you punctuate them with periods. So again, I'm not going to solve all of your heading problems today. You're just going to have to use the book if you have a paper that's complex enough. And a dissertation could be complex enough that you would use 5 levels of headings. That's quite possible. Okay, getting back to the first page of the paper. It's going to start on page 2 unless the assignment requires an abstract, in which case the paper is going to start on page 3. You're going to always retype the title of the paper on the first line of the first page of the paper, and it's going to be centered. So you repeat the title, and that's a common omission that I see in student papers. They forget to type that, or instead of typing the title of the paper there, they type the word introduction. And then immediately below that title, you're going to type the introduction to the paper, which of course is not going to have the heading introduction, but it is indeed going to be the introduction, because it's implied or assumed that the first paragraph of your paper is always going to be the introduction. And you should always have an introduction to a paper unless your instructor says that you don't need one. And I doubt they're going to do that. Okay, and an introduction isn't going to necessarily be just one paragraph. It may be several paragraphs. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of a paper. And I was going to point out to you that I always show the ruler. You'll see the ruler, and I always have the paragraph marker turned on, because having the paragraph marker turned on helps me see where all my paragraph returns are. And it also helps me to see the number of spaces I've included after punctuation. And I think it comes up later, but you typically include at least one space after end of sentence punctuation. I think you can include, APA allows you to include 2, but you have to include at least one space there. And I think that's all I was going to say. Oh, here, when I was talking about the first line indent tool, I've used the first line indent tool, and that's what I'm pointing to right now. It's this little upside down triangle here. You can drag that over to the 1/2 inch mark to create your first line indent of your paragraph there. And once you format the first paragraph that way, each subsequent paragraph is already going to be set up with the first line indent, so you won't have to do it again. And just while we're at it, this upward pointing triangle is the hanging indent tool. So if we were creating a hanging indent, we could drag it over to the 1/2 inch mark, and then our first line indent would be back on the 1 inch margin. And that applies to when you're setting up your hanging indent for your reference list entries, which we probably won't get to because we're already almost halfway out of time. Okay. So then I mentioned already that your paper is always going to begin with an introduction. And the reason I bother mentioning that is because we've had it happen where student papers don't have an introduction. And by similarly, then you're going to also have a conclusion. The introduction basically is going to prepare readers for what they can expect in the rest of your paper, and it can be 1 paragraph, might be 3. The conclusion then is going to sort of reflect back on the paper and bring it to a logical close, and it'll essentially, by reflecting back, revisit the main topics covered in the paper. And it could be 1 paragraph at the end of the paper, but it might be 1 to 3 paragraphs. Okay, and we're still on the title page here, so I just wanted to go over the elements of the title page. Obviously, you're going to have a title on the title page, so the full title of your paper appears there, and it's going to be centered horizontally somewhere in the upper half of the page. So if you folded the page in half, the title has to be sitting above that fold line. It's going to be about 12 words in length, but you'll see lots of variation on that, particularly in manuscripts that you read. If you do have a lengthy title that spans the whole width of your page, then it'll wrap around to the next line. But what I would do is choose a logical location to break it into 2 lines so that it wraps sort of symmetrically or sort of in an appealing looking way, so that you don't have like 1 word from the title wrapping down to the second line, then it's kind of looks not very symmetrical, I guess. Okay. Paper title should be sufficiently descriptive of the paper topic. I have had students just list the name of the assignment there, like academic paper is the title of their paper. And that really doesn't distinguish your paper from all the other papers in the class, so it should be reflective of the topic or the problem addressed in the paper. And you're supposed to omit unnecessary words, and that really applies to reports of experiments and things like that. Researchers will include the words like the effect of XYZ intervention on said problem. And so you really don't need to include the words the effect of. And the APA manual has a little blurb about that in, I think, section 2.01. Okay. The byline and affiliation, byline's your name, typically. We don't have, I don't think, a lot of papers written at Allen College that have multiple authors, and if you do, then you're going to want to refer to the APA manual to see how to format multiple authors as the byline. Typically, it's going to be just you. Put your first name, your middle initial if you want, and your last name. Don't include credentials. And then below your author name, you're going to have the institutional affiliation, which is going to be Allen College if you're writing a paper for Allen College. These are all going to be spaced out with a double space. Okay. Optional information on the title page that Allen College allows is the course name, one double space below the affiliation, or in other words, one double space below Allen College, and then one double space below the course name. You can have the date of the paper. And there are particularities about how you type the date. You shouldn't use numbers, like you shouldn't type 03-21-17. You should actually type the word March 21 and then comma 2017. Or you can do start with the date, like the second example here, 14 February 2017, or if we were doing today's date, it would be 21 March 2017. So in other words, you shouldn't use these numbers like on the third bullet here. And the date, and your teacher or your instructor may not pay attention to this. I teach a class about doing academic writing, or it's a survey of that. And so I encourage them to use the date. Actually, I require them in my class. They have to, the date of the paper has to be either the date of submission or the date the assignment was due. And that is because a lot of times there's drafts of these papers that are posted in discussion postings for other students to give critique. And what I'll get then is papers dated a month ago. And I just think to be precise and professional and conscientious, you need to make your dates be accurate. They need to reflect. And you've got two options, the date the assignment was due or the date you actually submitted the paper would probably be the most precise date to put on the paper. And you can always, ask your professor if she or he has any specifications about that. The author notes, the last thing I've got listed on this slide, and typically we don't require an author note at Allen College. An author note has different, I'm trying to think of what you include in an author note. It could be acknowledgments, it could be specifications about maybe the department you work in, but we don't require it. So unless you're writing a manuscript for an APA journal, you don't need to worry about the author note. This is just a screenshot of a paper, and I put it here because I wanted to show you that right here I've got the title of the paper positioned just above the half line. I may even have it a little low, but I'm just showing you that that's as low as this title could appear on this page. If you went lower, then you'd be violating APA guidelines, heaven forbid. The rest of the information can appear below that line. And I also put this on here to show you that I broke the title. This is actually what I call like a two-part or a compound title, and it's kind of hard to see it because, and I can't make it any bigger for you, but you can see at the end of the first line there's a colon. So I've got writing academic papers using American Psychological Association editorial style, colon, basics and beyond. Okay, so that's my subtitle. And this looks fairly, I wouldn't say symmetrical, but it looks evenly dispersed or evenly placed. I don't just have one line or one word hanging down here on the second line. And then I got my name, and I've got Allen College, the affiliation, and then I've got some space holders for the course name and for the date that we could put in. Okay, so now I just want to kind of move away from structure into some writing style issues, and I think for the most part these things I've included in here are just issues I've encountered when I've been grading student papers or issues that I have been criticized for in papers that I've written for my instructors. Anthropomorphism is a mouthful, and I stumbled all over the word when I just said it, but basically what it means is attributing human actions or to inanimate objects or non-human beings. And the most common sort of forms of it I see are like these, the second and third bullet here. A journal article cannot do or be a study. Like students will write, this journal article did a study of XYZ. Okay, well the journal article is the place where the study is reported. The researchers did the study and they reported it in the journal article. So that all relates to being precise in APA style. You have to avoid anthropomorphism to be precise. However, you will see this violated a lot in journals. In fact, I just had a manuscript accepted for publication, and the way I had a sentence written was, Therefore, an integrative review was undertaken to identify and evaluate interventions for test anxiety in nursing students. And the editor edited it to, this article reports on an integrative review to identify and evaluate interventions for test in nursing students. So I was trying to avoid anthropomorphism, but if the journal editor wants to do it, they get to do it.
So Lisa, because I've been having this battle with my own course that I'm teaching, because my students want to put the findings of this study, and I said, but the study didn't really find it. So I was going toward, I think it's your next point when you start talking about third person, and we, and then my colleague's like, no, it has to be this way. I'm like, no, because I know that that's the thing.
Yeah. Well,
I can't say the word either.
I think if you look in APA under anthropomorphism, and I can't remember what page it's on, but you can look it up in the, or maybe I have it there. It's in section 3.09. I think it says that study findings can show things or can suggest things, but the findings can't do things that would require the actions of a researcher. All right. All right, then to third person. In APA, you probably were taught throughout junior high and high school and maybe before that that you shouldn't write in first person. And APA style allows you to write in first person to avoid confusing readers about who did what. In other words, APA doesn't want you writing, this author did a literature review. If you're talking about yourself having done a literature review, they would prefer I did a literature review, or you could actually write a literature review was done. Then you could argue that that's passive voice, but it's probably, I mean, I guess it's obvious if you say a literature review was done, you wrote the paper, I suppose it's obvious that you did it, but in any case, you can use first person if you want to make, you want to avoid any confusion about who did an action. Now, if you're writing a paper with someone else, it's sort of the same thing. The authors implemented the project. If you're talking about you and your co-authors, you just want to say we implemented the project. Or you can go the passive voice route, I guess, and say the project was implemented by us. I don't know. I don't know how you get away without using a pronoun there. Okay. That doesn't mean that your paper can be full of I think and I feel and I did, okay? Because there are ways to get around that. If I start seeing lots of I thinks, I just X that out because whatever follows I think is obviously what you thought, so there's no point even including those words there. So it's unnecessary use of first person in that case. Okay, and editorial we is something I see a lot, and I think it's because when you read professional writing, you see a lot of it, particularly in certain nursing journals like, I want to say like RN and maybe American Journal of Nursing. They write in a more casual style sometimes, and so I'll see editorial we used a lot. But basically what editorial we is the use of the pronoun we to refer to things that are done in general. They're not necessarily things you as an author did, but it's your generalization of the idea to everybody else, or maybe to the profession. So you want to avoid the use of that. And if you're writing a paper by yourself, there's no reason to use the pronoun we in that paper because you're not authoring it with anyone else, and you should avoid the general use of we to describe broader general notions or actions. So in other words, you shouldn't write things like, we understand that people have diverse needs. That's a sort of a general statement, but you could write, it is generally understood that people have diverse needs, and then you're avoiding the editorial we there. Or you could just simply say, people have diverse needs. So in other words, use we only when you're referring to things that you and your co-authors actually did, then you're reporting that. Okay, now we're getting into the really exciting stuff, mechanics, capitalization, and then punctuation and those sorts of things. Okay, but APA does have some kind of weird and hard to understand rules about capitalization. Some of them are ones that you would not dispute or be surprised by, but you always, of course, capitalize the words beginning a sentence. And then any titles used in text, and the reason I point out in text is because you type Some titles in reference list entries in sentence case, which means you don't capitalize every word or every major word, but titles of books, book chapters, documents, things like that that you mention in text, you're going to type those in what's called title case, and that means that all major words begin with a capital letter, and in APA style, any words of 4 letters or more are capitalized in titles. So they're like with, a lot of times people have been, I don't know, taught that you don't capitalize the word with, but in APA style, with is a 4-letter word, so you would capitalize it in a title. Okay, and there's other words too, I just can't think of any right now. Any proper nouns and trade names, obviously you're always going to capitalize those regardless of where they are. You're going to capitalize the major words in level 1 and level 2 headings in APA style, and you'll see what I mean if you happen to look at the section in APA manual about headings. You'll see that the lower level of headings are typed maybe in sentence case rather than title case. And then the first word, you capitalize the first letter of the first word following a colon in a 2-part title, and this is another error that I see a lot. Students, particularly in the reference list, they won't capitalize that first letter of that first word following the colon or a dash in a 2-part title. Okay, italics is always tricky too. Titles of books, periodicals, and certain documents are always italicized in text and probably also in the reference list entries. Any letters, words, or phrases that are presented as linguistic examples, and you'll see that coming up later in this presentation when I'm talking about the use of words like while and since and because and that. I italicize them because I'm using them as linguistic examples. You also italicize words that you're trying to emphasize. Okay. Other things that get italicized are volume numbers and reference list entries and statistical symbols, and I put some of those in parentheses there for you. We're good here? We don't have any questions or anything? Okay. Abbreviations. You always, in APA style papers, you always have to define abbreviations before you use them, and I would recommend that if you're going to use a term frequently throughout your paper, that at least 4 times, then I would define an abbreviation for it. And so I got an example of how you do that here. The purpose of the study was to describe test anxiety. So boom, there I defined test anxiety abbreviation as a capital T and a capital A. In nursing students, and to explore the effect of, there comes the term again, TA on academic performance, and then TA was measured with a standard instrument. Okay, I should probably do a word count in my article that article I was talking about earlier that just got accepted for publication, to see how many times the abbreviation TA appears, but it was frequently, more than frequently, abundantly probably. So you want to define abbreviations. Don't bother defining an abbreviation if you're only going to use the term like 2 or 3 times. If you're going to use it 3 or more times, or beyond the first time you use the term, if you're going to use it 3 more times, so 4 times at least, then define an abbreviation. Okay. Some abbreviations that you don't have to define are these Latin abbreviations. E.g. is example given. This VS is versus. IE is, what is IE? It's like this, or in other words, I think is a good way to define what IE means. And etc. means and so on. Okay, these abbreviations don't have to be defined. You can just use them without defining them, but they always are used in parentheses. So you can't use these words without enclosing them, or these abbreviations without enclosing them in parentheses. If you're trying to give examples of something and not use parentheses, then you would say examples include, or examples given are. You'd actually use those words. Or you'd spell the word versus, V-E-R-S-U-S. Some abbreviations are accepted as words, and there's no need to define them, but I'm just going to refer you to sections 4.24 and 4 through 4.30 in the APA manual. If an abbreviation appears in the dictionary, as a word, then you don't have to define it. I used to think ICU, or intensive care unit, was in the dictionary, but it's only in there as a defined abbreviation, so it's not in there as the word. I used to tell students they could use ICU without defining it, but technically you have to. I didn't skip something here, did I? Okay. Numbers. Numbers are always a lot of fun. The very, very general rule is that numbers less than 10 have to be expressed in words. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you all have to write those out as words. There are exceptions. Any number that's 10 or greater can be written as a number. Okay. However, unless if you're beginning a sentence with a number, you have to use the word, not the numeral. And you know, if that's awkward, then revise the sentence so that you don't have to start with a number, because it gets kind of awkward to write 125 as a word at the beginning of a sentence. So kind of consider that. Numbers less than 10 can be written as numerals if they precede a unit of measure. So inches, centimeters, or a unit of time, or dates and ages. And I swear I have to look I can't remember these rules. I have to look in the APA manual every time I'm dealing with numbers to figure out whether I can write it as a number or a numeral. So I put the sections there for you to refer to. And as I said, there are many exceptions to the rules for expressing numbers. So you basically, there's no point in trying to memorize them. Just keep that APA manual in your purse at all times so that you have it.
Tables and figures, you can choose.
Just numbers in tables. Yep. Right. Christina pointed out that in tables and figures you can use just numbers.
Like table 2 in the text.
Right.
When you have it not, so when you're talking about it within the text of the document itself.
It can still be table numeral 1, but like if there was a number in the title of your table, then it still has to be written out. It can't be written as a number unless it's, you know, greater than 10. Like I'm just saying, like, you know, you've got table 1 period and then the title of the table that follows that. If there was a number in that table, you would have to follow the rules about whether you could write it as a number or not. Okay, seriation. Seriation is just when you list 3 or more things in succession. You have to separate the items in the series with commas, and you also, what did I put there? Okay. Oh, I had this blurb about a comma at the beginning here that I'm probably going to repeat later, but you want to insert a comma prior to the conjunction preceding the last item in a series of 3 or more items. Did that sound like jargon or what? And I forgot to put a period at the end of that. That gets forgotten a lot. I think a lot of people were raised that, like, say you're listing 3 or 4 things in a series and then you have and prior to the last one, that you don't need a comma prior to the and, but in APA style you do. So I always require that students put it there. They have to have that final comma there before the conjunction, which could be and or other conjunctions. Okay, so yeah, here's an example. Participants performed running, swimming, and singing. Some of you may have been taught that you don't need this comma right here before swimming, but in APA style you do. Now, sometimes you have a series that consists of series. So you have a series of series, and in that case, instead of using commas to separate the items in the series, you use semicolons. Okay, so you have a series of things that are already separated by commas. And here's an example. Participants could choose to jog or run, to swim the breaststroke, backstroke, or dog paddle, and to hum, sing, or chant. Now notice not every item, like this first item isn't a series of 3 or more items, but just to be consistent, the rest of the items, and to distinguish each of the items in the series, because jog or run, it was 1 item, I used semicolons to separate them. Okay. And regarding, kind of related to series is parallel structure. You have to use words that achieve parallel structure, and I don't do a very good job of explaining this, and I'll just apologize in advance, but okay, so we've got, this is correct. Participants ran, swam, and sang. This is not correct. Participants ran, did swimming, and sang. So we've got a swimming in here among the sang and the ran. Okay, it needs to be converted to swam in order to be parallel with the way the other words are constructed. Make sense? So don't miss your ings and angs, I guess. I get the saying is fine because it's a past tense. All right, punctuation. I know you've been just anxiously anticipating this. We're going to talk about commas again. You use the commas before and after non-restrictive clauses. And non-restrictive, it basically is another word for it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence, kind of like parentheses, but we're not actually going to talk about parentheses, I don't think. But and you would use commas between two independent clauses that are linked with a conjunction, like and or. Or basically what that means too is you've got two complete sentences and you connect them together with an and or an or. Then you need a comma prior to the and. Now if you're going to do something like that, first make sure you don't have two really long sentences that you're connecting or that you've created a comma splice. It might be better to have just two separate sentences there. And then you're going to use a comma between author and year in a parenthetical citation in the text of your paper. Okay. Semicolons are always hard, and there's a lot of funny things that have been said about semicolons, but we don't really have time because we're down to just 10 minutes left. You can use a semicolon to separate two complete sentences that are very closely related. An idea that you kind of have, I swear you have to kind of get a feeling for using semicolons. And there's no requirement to use semicolons except to separate series of series in a sentence, but if you're going to use them, you have to use them right. So you've got two closely related independent clauses that are not linked by a conjunction. You can link them with a semicolon, in which case the second independent clause would not start with a capital letter. Okay, otherwise you might as well just use a period. Okay, and I didn't put any examples here, but I think you probably get the gist of it, and you can look in section 404 if you want to. All right, colon then. A lot of people confuse colons and semicolons. A colon is something that announces something coming up, okay? It's used at the end of a complete introductory clause. And I say a complete introductory clause because that's an APA rule. And a lot of times I will see colons used after incomplete introductory clauses. But in APA it has to be like a complete sentence that's going to introduce a series of something or maybe another sentence or a statement or something like that. So, and here's just a quick example. This is a complete introductory clause here. Participants could choose from among the following physical activities, colon, and these are the physical activities they could choose from. The title of the study is Physical and Mental Benefits of 3 Psychomotor Activities, colon, running, swimming, and singing. So 2 examples of colon use. A lot of times I'll see students use a colon after an incomplete introductory clause, and it could be made complete by adding the words the following or the following items. So just make sure that when you're using a colon that it's preceded by a complete sentence or introduction. Okay, dashes. Dashes are used to separate the parts of a 2-part title. Sometimes they're used instead of a colon. You can also use dashes to offset a non-essential clause in a sentence. Make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself here. They can offset information that's going to interrupt the flow of the sentence, but it isn't necessarily essential to the meaning of the sentence. In other words, if you left off the information between the 2 dashes on either side of it, it wouldn't change the meaning of the sentence, but the information that's offset sort of embellishes the sentence. Used a lot in creative writing. Okay, and by the same token, you can enclose that information in parentheses. To create a dash, type 2 consecutive hyphens, and don't put any spaces between or on either side of them. And a lot of times your word processor will automatically convert that to a single line dash, and if it doesn't, you can put your cursor after the second hyphen and hit a return, and Word will usually convert it, and then you can just remove the paragraph return that you just created.
Sometimes I use a dash to see things up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know if, would they have heard you say that?
They should.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I use it more like if I'm doing creative writing, I'll use the dash. Otherwise, yeah. Okay, quotation marks. You're obviously going to use quotation marks to enclose short quotations, and by short quotations, I'm just going to say this now because I don't think we're going to have time to get to quotations, is a series of quoted words that are quoted word for word from a source, and you have less than 39 or fewer words. Okay, a long quotation is 40 or more words. So you enclose a short quotation in quotation marks. You might also use quotation marks to introduce invented slang or ironic terms. And sometimes that, I see that happening a lot in student work when it isn't necessary. Quotation marks can be used to denote the title of a book, chapter, or an article in a periodical in the text of your paper, not in the reference list. Okay, so if you're mentioning the title of a book, chapter, or an article in a journal in the text of your paper, you would need to enclose it in quotation marks. As opposed to the journal name or the actual book title, and those would be italicized in the text of your paper, just as they would be in the reference list. Okay, when you're quoting information that contains terms or phrases that are already enclosed in double quotation marks, then you're going to convert the double quotation marks around the words in the quoted material to single quotation marks. Okay, that's standard. One thing I'll just caution you about, and we don't really have time to go into it, is that I would avoid quoting a quotation. Okay, because for sure if you do that, you're probably getting into secondary source citation, and it gets messy and awkward and everything else. So as a general rule, just avoid quoting quotations. Hyphens are kind of like dashes. They're kind of like mini dashes, but, and like I said, you create a dash by typing 2 consecutive hyphens. But the reason I'm talking about hyphens here is because you use them to connect compound words, okay? And typically it's multi-word adjectives, so the word is modifying another word. And these are some examples here: follow-up visit, self-administered survey, one-way street, evidence-based practice. Any self-administered, oh, I already said that, self-effacing, those are all words that are they're listed, I think, in the examples in the APA manual as words that you would hyphenate. Okay. Now, just keep in mind that you don't always hyphenate follow-up. Follow-up visit is hyphenated because it's modifying visit. But if you were seeing a patient to follow up after surgery, then you wouldn't hyphenate it. So you just have to kind of be cognizant of that. Okay. Then we have apostrophes, and this is, I see apostrophes used unnecessarily, and they're used unnecessarily often because people will create possessives out of things that aren't possessive, or they will use apostrophes just out of habit, or they'll use a contraction. And of course an apostrophe is appropriate in a contraction, but in academic papers you should not use contractions. So if you find yourself using an apostrophe in a contraction, then just spell the word out and don't use the contraction to begin with. But basically the apostrophe is used to denote possession. Okay, so we got the nurse's hours were long, the nurse attended to the patients, meaning this is a plural possessive thing. That gets, that's kind of a common issue too, is to mess up plural and singular possessive. When you're creating a plural possessive, you just put the apostrophe at the end of the S of the plural word, and you don't add another S. Whereas to create possession for a nurse, a singular subject, then you have to add the S after the apostrophe. I already mentioned contractions. Do not use apostrophe to denote plurality of RNs. I see that a lot. You don't need an apostrophe there for RNs unless it's you're trying to show possession. If you're just showing plurality, you don't need to use the apostrophe. A lot of times you'll see apostrophes used when people are talking about a decade, the 1990s. So you just leave the apostrophe out. You don't need the apostrophe. Okay. Got like 1 more minute. So, and I think we're almost, we'll finish punctuation and then just quit with grammar. Ellipses points are a series of 3 spaced periods, okay, and you use them to denote the omission of words from a quotation, and you also use them prior to the last author's name in a reference list entry that has more than 7 authors, and that's, I think, described in Chapter 7 of the APA manual. It might even be Section 7. Oh, I have Section 6.08 on here, but I think that may have to do with quoting. I think it's in Section 7.01 when you were talking about reference list entries. And they have to be spaced. Okay, so you type space, period, space, period, space, period, space. All right? A lot of times what Word will do to you is it will take out those spaces and squish them together, in which case you can either go up and undo the auto formatting or just retype them and then Word will leave it alone. But APA says to space your ellipses points, and so therefore I teach you to space your ellipses points. Okay, in spacing after a punctuation, I think maybe I already mentioned this, you want to have 2 spaces after end of sentence punctuation. But I was thinking that was, you could be 1 or 2. Maybe it is a hard and fast rule.
I thought it was used to be 2, but they switched it to 1. But that's
1.
in a different style. Because I remember
Yeah.
it was always 2 when we were growing
Yeah,
up.
I think you might.
1 now, I think.
May have to check on that.
I think it has to do with website building because they moved to 1 space to save coding.
Okay. Okay, so you think maybe APA did that too. I know you used to have to type 2 spaces at the end of sentence punctuation, but I was thinking in APA you could do 1 or 2,
I
but
think it's 1 or 2 as well.
I better
I think I've read that.
better check that out. But
Purdue Owl says APA suggests using 2 spaces after periods
Yeah.
to readability.
okay, so it's a suggestion, but not really a rule. But so
And it's section spacing 4.01.
okay,
This is the
Oh.
section.
and that's what I have on there. So if you want to read about how many spaces you have to have after end punctuation, go to section 4.01 in the APA manual. Okay, and then you want to have just 1 space after commas, colons, semicolons, and periods in reference list entries. 1 space after the this gets forgotten a lot, or overlooked a lot, the 3rd bullet. 1 space after the internal periods of initials for a person's name. And that often gets omitted in reference list entries. So like my name is Lisa D. Brodersen, so in the reference list it would be Brodersen, comma, L period space, D period space. Okay. Or if there was an author after me, there would be a comma after the D. But the internal period after L, you'd need a space after that before the D. Let's see, do not space the internal periods in abbreviations that contain periods like USA, PM, AM, those sorts of things. You don't have to insert space there. It's mainly in the reference list in author names. Okay, I'll quit with grammar and I can always come back if you want me to go into these particular grammar rules, but they're basically addressed on that APA grading key handout that I gave to Brenda to send to you. So if you have any questions about that stuff, I'm available. My email address is lisa.brodersen@allencollege.edu, and that's actually at the end of your handout. I'll just scoot down there, and there we go. Oh, okay. if you're willing, I'm willing. Okay, pretty excited. I was trying to show my email address to them, but I'm way far away. There. Oh, back. Maybe. Oh, I'm sorry, it escaped on me. Oh, Lord.
I'll type it in the chat box.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and good luck to you for the rest of the semester. Do I need to stop?